Everything begins by showing the great lake city of Lunuana, which is located in the kingdom of Castul. With this, we see that the grand walls of this place are completely engulfed in flames during an invasion. At that moment, several flags from different kingdoms wave high above in the strong wind, and then a massive army raises their weapons high in the air, ready for the great conflict. Suddenly, a giant black dragon flies over the bridge while the soldiers ask to let it pass. The winged beast flies toward the highest tower of the castle to begin the strike on the kingdom. Meanwhile, on the ground, brave human warriors fight fiercely against armored monsters. A dark-haired swordsman in a green cape defends himself from a strike, trying to counterattack. The young man uses a lot of strength to hold back the advance of that threatening creature. With a great deal of effort, he pushes the opponent away, delivering a powerful slash right after. The creature is destroyed and falls to the dirt ground, confirming its defeat in this grand battle. Panting, the warrior tells his companions that the numbers of the evil forces are dropping. However, another monster leaps by surprise from behind him with a sword ready to strike. The boy notices the threat and looks back in fear, knowing he would not have time to dodge. But suddenly, a very powerful flash of light crosses the battlefield at high speed. A blonde warrior appears, attacking the enemy with precision and saving the protagonist. The girl covers her face with a scarf, asking the rookie not to charge in recklessly. He agrees, thanking his savior, while she is already running toward the other creatures. The heroine jumps into the middle of the opponents, announcing that her tribe will take the front line. With this, the other fighters also prepare to continue the advance of the invasion in the area. The swordsman becomes very motivated by the help, holding his weapon with great firmness and courage. At that moment, a long-haired man passes by him, telling the young man to step back a little. The mysterious guy summons a gigantic barrier of flames, pushing the opponents away quickly. The rookie is completely amazed, observing the immense power of that formidable ally. Facing the intense fire, the powerful mage stands firm, leading the way for the group. He then takes a step, walking through the flames without suffering absolutely a single scratch. With glowing eyes, the sorcerer summons the power of a shadowy being to cast a spell. Viewing the situation from above, we notice that the flames begin to consume all the villains in the area. The two warriors observe the destruction, surprised by the enormous, destructive force of that man. The mage creates a sphere of light in his hand, saying he will engrave the scar of wrath on their adversaries. Suddenly, a massive explosion occurs, breaking the walls that block their advance. Several pieces of stone fly through the air, raising a lot of dust and smoke in the war scene. The young man uses his own arm to protect himself from the strong wind caused by the devastating impact. The blonde woman raises her sword and announces that the gate is open, ordering the final invasion. Everyone shouts with great excitement, running together to finally enter the grand castle. With this, they cross the rubble, demanding their long-dreamed freedom while defeating the guards. Walking slowly, the protagonist reflects on how that glorious kingdom was falling apart. The army advances through the ruins, seeking the day when true peace will be completely restored. With this, a calloused hand grips the hilt of the sword, demonstrating all of its hope. The warrior moves forward, thinking that now there is only one more step left until victory. A boot steps firmly on the stone, while the narrator announces that the conquest is no longer just a dream. The brave fighters leap against the dangers, declaring that the long journey will end today. In the distance, we can see the grand towers of the city being destroyed by the flames of the violent conflict. Inside the luxurious hall, we notice that the fire has also spread, burning everything around it. A white-haired gentleman in noble clothes observes the situation with a very thoughtful expression. We see that a young woman in a purple cape approaches the enormous throne where that old monarch is seated. The girl announces that the rule of that place has finally come to an end after so many difficult struggles. The leader touches his own face, looking very tired, and replies by saying that none of this matters. The red-eyed mage stays in complete silence, listening to the words of that ruler. But suddenly, the man's face changes, revealing a scary smile full of pure wickedness. The king, surrounded by shadows, states that the kingdom means nothing anymore since his wish has been fulfilled. The purple-caped mage looks at the sovereign in surprise, noticing that the spell was finally complete. With wide red eyes, the woman notices something very bizarre happening to the monarch. The old man transforms into a frightening skeleton covered in blue flames to obtain eternal life. With this, the leader claims he will live forever, leaving all of his terrible cruelty in the past. The counselor closes her eyes, giving a relieved smile, saying that this was a very happy occasion. At that moment, the emperor gives a sinister laugh, showing that he was plotting something very bad. He rests his arm on the throne, asking if the woman did not feel the same due to the crown she wore. The sorceress gets quite confused by the lord's question and looks to the side, trying to understand. She replies with a slight smile, stating that she has no idea what the boss was talking about. The old mage just laughs from above, wondering what the use of those things would be now. With this, the powerful monarch stands up from the throne, announcing that their paths had separated. Then the sovereign uses his grand red staff to conjure a huge magic circle on the wall. A dark passage full of sinister smoke opens up, revealing a frightening secret path. The master of magic stands still in front of that dark portal, preparing to leave the area. With this, the man walks toward the shadowy hallway, saying goodbye to his loyal purple companion. The girl observes the departure of her leader with a very surprised and upset expression about the farewell. The mage is left alone in the huge illuminated hall, saying goodbye to the last great governor of Lodos. The scene changes, showing a very dark stone staircase being lit by small torches. We see the detail of a fire burning intensely on the wall of that mysterious and cold castle. The monarch walks down the steps slowly, walking alone through the depths of that building. The emperor's long robes drag on the stone floor as he moves forward with firm steps. Suddenly, the gray-haired mage looks back, seemingly noticing a presence following him in the darkness. A young warrior with white hair and red clothes approaches from behind the old king. The girl with a moon ornament on her neck calls for the lord with a very serious and determined look. The sovereign smiles, asking the reason she is there, telling the young woman to hurry if she wants to live. Very calmly, the ruler announces that that grand city would sink into the lake in a very short time. But the warrior holds the man's arm with a lot of strength, stopping his advance through the hallway. The young woman calls the leader uncle, demanding the old promise to receive the supreme title of the region. The powerful lord just looks at his niece with a very calm expression and without any fear. He then raises his magic staff toward the sorceress, ordering her to take the weapon. The young woman is completely shocked, recognizing that that artifact was the governor's emblem. The gray-haired man tells the girl to engrave her name on the item, declaring her as the new leader of the place. However, the young woman does not accept it so easily and asks desperately about the future of the city and the Grand Kingdom. Turning his back, the mage replies that everything would fall soon, but promises to leave his legacy to her. Walking into the darkness, the king orders her to use her wisdom to guide the fate of the island. The new governor stands alone in the shadowy hallway, holding tightly to the beautiful red staff. The girl's face shows a lot of anger and sadness as she tries to hold back her tears of pain. She squeezes the mystical weapon with great fury, making the artifact shine and emit a purple energy. Surrounded by enormous scary monsters, the young woman swears she would never forgive those wretched pests. The bright-eyed young woman declares with all her strength that she would take back what was stolen. With this, an old map appears showing the grand island of Lodos, which would be cursed in the future. The scene cuts, revealing a wonderful landscape with beautiful green mountains and a huge village. We can get a better look at the simple wooden houses surrounded by large rustic walls for protection. A beautiful tree gently sways its leaves with the strong breeze of that sunny day. We see the feet of someone walking calmly along a little dirt road right next to the houses. A traveler in a long white cape approaches the gates of the village where some villagers are working. Two friendly peasants welcome the mysterious visitor with a lovely smile, wishing them a good day. Next, we observe a rustic two-story house with strange noises coming from inside. The main street of the small village appears full of residents running around, quite agitated by something. Just then, the girl in the white cape is greeted by a very cheerful merchant who announces his great products. Walking around the area, she hears a lady offering great special discounts for the day of the festival. With a gentle smile, the red-haired young woman approaches, greeting the woman politely. The vendor calls the girl Seraphine, handing her several fruits and asking her to take them to the training area. Holding a full bag, the redhead is surprised, while the lady thanks the guards for their hard work. The merchant also asks the young woman to tell the captain that her husband needs an urgent rest. Then the lady jokes, telling the girl not to give everything just to her boyfriend, bringing about some laughs. Soon, we see a large training area with several people practicing sword combat outdoors. At that instant, two wooden weapons clash with a lot of force, demonstrating a very intense training session. The dark-haired warrior makes a very aggressive move, completely focused on his development. But the older opponent defends the boy's strong strike, using only one of his feet with great ease. The experienced warrior counterattacks, quickly warning that the student's movements are too exposed. With this, the sword flies through the air while the young man falls to the ground, completely defeated by the skilled master. The captain points his weapon at the rookie, saying that with that lack of skill, he would not protect anyone. Fallen on the dirt, the boy looks up, listening to all the harsh criticisms from that skilled blonde instructor. Suddenly, the master pauses the fight, telling everyone to start over, complaining about the slowness of his other students. He demands that the warriors pick up their weapons and take their positions, claiming that strength comes from heavy training. The apprentices complain of being tired, reminding him that they still need to work on the preparations for the big festival. The redhead arrives, interrupting the argument, and hands over the fruits, passing along the message from that housewife. Right then, the dark-haired young apprentice gets up from the ground, getting quite excited to see his friend there. The young man gently takes the large bag from his companion's hands, helping to carry all the weight of the food. One of his friends jokes, saying that his energy came back very fast, making the boy totally embarrassed. The captain then asks what the young woman came to do there, discovering that the temple needed urgent help. With a kind look, the girl asks the master to release the squad earlier today due to the grand holiday. The instructor hesitates for a moment, warning that those men still needed a lot more training. But all the warriors raise their swords, immediately offering to help the redhead with the festival. The master gets upset, stating that the training would now be doubled, sparking even more shouts from the squad. Taking advantage of the confusion, the boy holds the girl's hand and runs away from there, shouting that he would help with the preparations. The two run along the dirt path, laughing a lot as they leave the shouting captain behind. Arriving at a beautiful green field, the boy finally stops running, hoping not to be chased all the way to that spot. He stretches, trying to understand that experienced master's great obsession with daily training. The redhead asks the young man not to take the situation personally, defending the instructor's tough attitude. The swordsman pushes back, arguing that with the old empire already destroyed, there was no reason for another war. The narrator explains that in the past, that vast island suffered at the hands of the terrible viceroy of the Castle Empire. Due to the immense cruelty of that ruler, several different tribes formed an alliance to protect themselves. With the success of the Great Revolt, a wonderful peace finally took over all the kingdoms of that island. The boy turns his face, becoming quite reflective about all those ancient legends of the place's shadowy past. We once again see that massive tree on top of a hill being lit by the beautiful and bright sunlight. The two friends rest under its canopy, admiring the entire wonderful horizon very peacefully. The young woman raises her arms, stretching her body, causing a lot of embarrassment for her companion by her side. With very red cheeks, the boy shyly asks his friend to look in his direction for a moment. The young woman leans in with her face turned, getting quite curious about the intentions of that skilled youth. Very nervous, the boy in green clothes extends his closed hand toward his companion's chest. He opens his palm, revealing a beautiful necklace with a blue jewel, making the girl incredibly happy and surprised. The redhead holds the ornament in awe, asking since when that silly guy started gifting her with jewelry. Looking away, he claims to have remembered that the young woman had been complaining about her great lack of accessories. After hearing that sweet explanation, the girl shows a huge passionate smile, lighting up the whole scene. Leaning closer, she closes her eyes sweetly, asking her friend to place the beautiful jewelry around her neck himself. Faced with this sincere display of pure affection, the warrior cracks a wide, very calm and comfortable smile. Then, he approaches slowly, adjusting that valuable gift very carefully around his beloved's neck. The girl adjusts the new jewel on her forehead, asking if the gift suited her. The young man smiles very sweetly, stating that his companion looks beautiful. She thanks him, giving a tight hug to the warrior who ends up being caught by surprise. Quite embarrassed, the boy looks around, afraid that someone might see the two of them there. But soon, he calms down, hugging his beloved with much affection under the large tree. At that moment, some leaves blow across the reddish sky with the strong breeze of the area. The two admire the wonderful landscape close together, truly enjoying their moment of peace. The beautiful flower field shines in the sunlight, while the couple continues standing side by side. However, the scene suddenly changes, showing wooden houses collapsing in the middle of flames. The fire consumes everything quickly, turning the peaceful village into a real nightmare. Panting and sweaty, the swordsman apprentice runs desperately, trying to understand the situation. Just then, several frightening creatures with red eyes emerge from the middle of the shadowy smoke. The boy goes into shock and begins to cry, asking himself where he was, facing the horrible bone monsters. A familiar voice shouts, telling the young man to react. We see the captain of the guard slashing the undead to save the scared boy's life. The skilled blonde warrior asks the rookie to open his eyes and pay close attention. But suddenly, the master is pierced through the back by a blade coming from the thick smoke. The boy watches the terrible scene with great dread, calling that hurt man his father. The brave captain stays on his feet, even though he is surrounded by countless villains ready to strike. Bleeding heavily, the experienced soldier accepts his terrible fate in the middle of the blazing fire. Seeing his father fall, the young man lets out a cry of denial with immense pain in his heart. With this, the boy wakes up startled in his own bed, calling out for his leader in great despair. He takes a deep breath, trying to calm down, while sweat runs down his tired face. Sitting on the bed, the warrior realizes he only had a nightmare due to the heavy training. However, a strong sliver of light appears from under the door, illuminating the wooden floor. The young man gets up confused, wondering why someone would be awake at that time of night. He then walks slowly through the dark room, wanting to find out what was happening. Then, his strong hand grabs the large doorknob to unlock the heavy wooden door. As soon as he opens the door, a very intense orange glow hits the boy's face. The swordsman is completely terrified by the terrible scene he has just witnessed. Some innocent villagers appear, fallen lifeless on the ground amid the destructive flames. The sadness is enormous seeing those good people hurt and taken down in the worst possible way. The fire swallows the small village, creating a massive scene of chaos and much pain all around. Loud explosions occur, destroying the houses even further and spreading smoke throughout the area. The impact throws the debris far away, revealing the mysterious attackers hidden in the shadows. All the homes are on fire, showing that the entire tribe was targeted by this cruel attack. The brave warrior jumps from his house straight into the conflict area, wielding his weapon. With anger, he questions who could have caused such a grand tragedy in his hometown. Walking down the street, the boy spots countless cruel monsters holding sharp swords. He wonders where those undead creatures came from while gripping the handle of his blade. The scary creatures notice the boy's presence, rushing straight toward him. The young warrior grumbles, drawing his weapon with clenched teeth, ready to fight. A skeleton warrior lets out a fierce shout, raising its blade to strike the survivor. But the trained boy uses all his strength to defend himself, holding back the attacker's advance. With this, the hero pushes the enemy's sword away, delivering a powerful and long slash to the opponent. The enemy steps back after the hit, while more cruel zombies approach through the massive chaos. A one-armed creature roars, raising a rusty axe, trying to finish off the young fighter. The brave apprentice keeps his stance, dodging and counterattacking the strike of that monster. Focused on the battle, the boy does not take a single step back, showing a lot of anger in his expression. And so, he strikes the chest of the scary threat, proving that his master's lessons work. Panting, the young swordsman continues fighting with all his might in the middle of all that intense fire. He lands another powerful strike on the monsters, while someone shouts his name from afar. At that, the boy looks to the side and sees his beloved fighting bravely against those terrible threats. The brave redhead glows intensely on the battlefield, ordering the beings of darkness to retreat. With great power, the mage sends the enemies back to the underworld from where they should never have left. At that moment, one of the monsters takes advantage of the boy's distraction, trying to deliver a strong surprise hit. But quickly, the terrible zombie ends up being cut in half by an ally before it manages to attack. To everyone's surprise, the skilled captain appears alive in the combat, asking the girl to keep going. However, the joy lasts very little as the beloved master is pierced through the back by a cruel attack. The young swordsman falls into total despair and kicks the monsters away with immense fury. Full of anger, the warrior charges through the flames, screaming his girlfriend's name to try to help. Suddenly, a gigantic pillar of holy light comes down from the skies, hitting the center of that village. Floating in the air, the powerful sorceress joins her hands together, conjuring massive divine magic across the area. With her eyes shining intensely, the girl unleashes all her strength to purify the terrible evil. The strong wave of energy spreads out, completely destroying all the undead in that region. With this, the young man has to use his own arm to protect his face from that very bright flash. Several monsters begin to turn to dust, vanishing completely thanks to the spell of the brave warrior. The holy light covers a large part of the houses, ending the danger and purifying that entire area. Little by little, the grand magic spell begins to fade, leaving the village illuminated by the flames. Out of energy, the girl in the white cape falls to her knees on the ground, completely exhausted from the effort. At that moment, the young warrior shouts his beloved's name, running desperately toward her. He approaches, asking if the heroine is hurt, but she replies that she only needs to rest. Looking at the destruction all around, the couple tries to figure out where those enemies had come from. The boy then gives a relieved smile, praising his girlfriend's strength for having saved everyone. But the young woman holds the swordsman's hand with great sadness, saying that the battle is not over yet. The girl warns that magic only wiped out a small part of the monsters that invaded the village. With a lot of fear, the two companions look back and are left totally paralyzed by the scene. A scary new army of undead appears, walking through the fire without stopping their advance. Seeing the massive disadvantage, the boy wields his sword, furious about the return of those creatures. With this, the bone monsters start running brutally toward the couple to finalize the strike. Without thinking twice, the brave hero steps in front of the sorceress, slashing the enemies without mercy. Suddenly, a giant monster appears in front of him, leaving the warrior in a terrible situation. The young man realizes he has no way to dodge that deadly strike and braces himself for the worst. Seeing her loved one in danger, the brave mage screams desperately, feeling a very deep fear. At that moment, a loud bang echoes across the battlefield, kicking up dust everywhere. To everyone's shock, the valiant captain appears, blocking the fatal attack with his large shield. The instructor gives a slight smile, teasing the student by saying that this happens due to lack of training. Right after that, other village guards arrive at the scene to help the two young survivors. The boy breaks into a big smile on his face, feeling extremely relieved to see all his friends again. The girl in white clothes helps her beloved stand up, while the team promises to fight together until the end. With a lot of determination, the experienced leader raises his sword, ordering everyone to get ready right there. The rookie swordsman resumes his combat stance, full of confidence to put an end to that evil. Then he bravely charges against the shadowy army, delivering several very strong attacks. But suddenly dark clouds take over the sky, and a huge lightning bolt strikes the middle of that village. The flash catches the attention of all the warriors, causing the grand confrontation to be paused right away. The brave villagers look up, quite confused, trying to understand what was happening. Meanwhile, we see soldiers crying, holding on to the bodies of the companions lost in the tragedy. The blonde master and his two students stay in total silence, feeling a very bad sensation coming. Looking worriedly at the dark clouds, the commander realizes that something terrible was about to fall. The narrator announces that rain was starting to wet the region, bringing even more mysteries to the fight. At that moment, thick raindrops begin to fall on the battlefield, heavily wetting all of that ground. The storm quickly intensifies, creating small puddles of mud across the dark scene of pure destruction. As a result, the water falls with immense force on the exhausted survivors, changing the tense atmosphere of the place. The captain quickly takes the lead, ordering everyone to search for more injured people among the debris. At this, the dark-haired boy becomes completely paralyzed, observing something terrible happening in the distance. Suddenly, a powerful shockwave throws the two youngsters backward with a frightening and brutal force. Amid the heavy rainstorm, a mysterious figure appears wearing a long hood, covering his pale face. The brave apprentice leans on his sword, feeling a very threatening aura coming from that cruel man. At that instant, the blonde master steps forward, irritated, questioning how the mysterious guy caused so much damage. However, the terrible invader just takes a firm step, walking calmly over the destroyed ground of the village. Without thinking twice, the brave boy rushes at the opponent, shouting with fury to get his revenge. But his girlfriend quickly grabs his arm, asking the warrior to wait and be very careful. The sound of the hooded man's boots stepping in the water puddles sends a massive chill down everyone's spine. The instructor shouts, warning that the scary creatures were taking over the place for a hidden reason. Sweating cold, the captain tries to keep a firm stance even while facing such a powerful and intimidating threat. The residents are completely terrified, noticing the sinister energy that dominated that terrible scene. Standing in the storm, the mysterious villain just stares at the warriors with a frightening coldness. He slightly raises his face, revealing red eyes filled with a deep and very ancient wickedness. The commander comes face to face with the monster, while the group tries to protect themselves from the impending grand battle. With a grim look, the shadowy being seems to analyze every move of the defenders of that small village. At this, the brave student gets upset, wanting to know how those freaks still kept showing up there. The gray-haired villain simply keeps his bored expression, showing he does not care about those heroes. He watches the master wield his weapon, warning that the outsider was in immense danger. The heavy storm keeps battering the wooden houses while the atmosphere gets increasingly suffocating. The powerful invader asks if the blonde man was some kind of vigilante trying to protect the place by himself. He praises the warrior's strength, stating that it would be hard to take down those monsters without having a lot of talent. The instructor gets confused by the enigmatic words of that dangerous opponent, trying to decipher his plan. With this, the pale enemy asks directly if the captain was the leader of all those poor people. The experienced fighter breaks into a cold sweat, noticing the incredible magical aura radiating from the body of that old monarch. Fearing for the worst, the master orders everyone to step back, charging into the attack with an unshakable determination. He lands a very strong strike, which is quickly blocked by the villain using only his own forearm. The powerful invader grips the sharp blade with his bare hands, displaying an abnormal resilience. Using only the force of the impact, the monarch throws the captain backward as if he were a light toy. The villain's arm hits the leader's face in a brutal move, leaving the fighter totally dazed, giving no chances. The cruel, shadowy being pierces the brave man's chest in a fast and merciless attack. The young redhead watches that horrible scene, covering her face in a total state of shock and deep panic. Badly hurt, the noble warrior loses all his strength and falls to his knees on the ground, bleeding heavily. The heavy boot sinks into the wet mud, marking the instructor's terrible fall in that cold dirt courtyard. Taken by a blind fury, the swordsman lets out a loud cry of pain, charging against his father's attacker. The boy leaps at full speed, wielding his sword with both hands in a brutal downward slash, but the white-haired villain doesn't even blink, facing the furious assault with a chilling calmness. With an incredible reflex, the pale warrior defends against the heavy blade with the edge of his arm easily. Many sparks fly from the huge friction, proving that the boy's effort was useless against that legend. The sword apprentice grinds his teeth, using the maximum strength he can to try and break the block. The red-eyed man analyzes the boy's incredible determination, wondering mentally about him. Right beside them, the poor leader tries to stay steady while bleeding dangerously under the heavy storm. The terrible monarch observes the student's fury, noticing that his sword carried only hate in its heart. Completely irritated, the protagonist grips the hilt tightly, focused solely on his sad revenge. Suddenly, a loud crack happens, and the warrior's powerful weapon breaks into pieces due to the pressure. The young man loses his balance, feeling the weight of the terrible blow he had just suffered at that moment. The villain blocks the attack with his arm and strikes back with a lot of force, throwing the young man backward. At this, the boy's eyes widen, feeling all the brutal impact of that hit on his body. With a cold look, the gray-haired monster advances relentlessly, showing all of his wickedness. Then, the cruel enemy grabs the boy's neck, lifting him with extreme ease. Looking deep into the apprentice's eyes, the shadowy warrior warns him that he is way too weak. Choked, the hero coughs up a lot of blood, suffering greatly at the hands of that cruel attacker. At that moment, a lightning bolt tears through the dark sky while the pale invader holds his prey firmly. The young fighter tries to break free from that deadly grip, using a lot of strength just to breathe. With coldness, the shadowy man raises his sharp blade, preparing for the final strike. Then the boy's look fills with pure panic, realizing that his end was near. The massive sword slices the air with great violence in a fatal and completely merciless strike. A powerful explosion of energy and blood happens, sealing the warrior's sad fate. The hooded man drops the defeated body, turning his back while the redhead watches, completely in shock. The sweet mage cries in despair upon seeing her beloved badly hurt. The brave swordsman lies fallen in the freezing mud, without the strength to continue that battle. Then a bright lightning bolt lights up the whole village. The instant the girl screams for him. Desperate, The heroine ignores the dangers and runs crying toward her great love. She throws herself onto the wet ground, falling to her knees right next to the body of that young fighter. With trembling hands, the girl touches the boy's back, feeling that he was still breathing, shedding many tears. The healer announces she is going to use magic to save his life. Clasping her two hands together, the sweet sorceress begins to pray, invoking the divine power of healing. With this, an incredibly warm and bright golden light appears in the palms of the young heroine. She places her magical hands over the wound, trying to transfer energy to the young man. But the cruel monarch appears right behind her, looking like a shadow in the middle of the storm. The pale man interrupts the spell by placing his heavy hand on top of the girl's head. With a scary look, the gray-haired invader warns her that all that effort would be useless. The poor mage breaks into a cold sweat, feeling an absolute terror freezing her entire fragile body. Even though she's terrified, she closes her eyes tightly, begging for a divine miracle. Suddenly, a mysterious voice echoes across the field, ordering the terrible villain to stop the attack. A witch, with a purple aura, communicates, asking the leader to take the young healer along. Keeping his blank expression, the monarch simply agrees to the order of that shadowy ally. With a lot of brutality, the man pulls the girl by her arm, interrupting the healing magic. He says that the vice queen was calling, dragging the poor girl away from there. Being pulled through the mud, the redhead tries to break free, screaming desperately for her hurt boyfriend. At this, the warrior's trembling hand moves slightly, showing that he kept listening, using his last bit of strength. The boy drags himself through the mud, calling out for his beloved in a lot of pain. The young apprentice's face shows an immense despair, seeing his only light being taken away. The poor sorceress cries for help as she is dragged into the great darkness. A massive thunderclap lights up the storm, marking the terrible departure of that villain. The swordsman tries to get up, bleeding heavily in the middle of that sad, destroyed scene. The entire peaceful village turned into a grand graveyard, drenched by the storm's thick raindrops. The girl continues to be pulled without any mercy, dirtying her beautiful white clothes. The pale monarch stops in front of a stone monument in the middle of that huge rainstorm. With an air of superiority, the cruel enemy looks down at his little hostage fallen on the ground, completely soaked. The young woman kneels in the mud, glaring at the monster with a lot of anger. The invader's reddish gaze shines with pure wickedness under the heavy night rain. Outraged, the healer demands to know the main reason for that cowardly massacre in her village. The pale warrior just turns his back to the girl, completely ignoring the question. Desperate, the heroine screams with all her strength, wanting to understand the monster's plan. But a shadowy voice with a purple aura replies, ironically stating that the truth would not change destiny. The red-haired girl widens her eyes, getting completely scared by the situation. At this, a very sinister purple energy starts swirling with a lot of violence around the area. The heroine notices that grand power has no sign of life on its inside. With this, a shadowy creature with a macabre smile forms in the middle of all the magic. Scared, the healer realizes that the enemy is a very strong and dangerous undead being. The monster shows a bizarre face, finding the red-haired girl very fascinating. Then the creature grabs the young woman, praising the pure spiritual vessel that she possesses. The young woman tries to break free, feeling the cold energy completely dominating her body. The great villain displays an evil smile, claiming he has found his ideal host. But the aura of darkness pierces the girl's chest in a very painful and deep strike. The sorceress suffers in agony, saying she cannot stop the advance of that power. The evil force creates a mystical heart to dominate her entire essence of life. Tired, the poor girl falls to her knees on the soaked ground, feeling an immense pain. With this, the terrible magic covers the girl, declaring that beautiful body would be stolen. The victim cries up to the sky, suffering greatly while being swallowed by the terrible shadows. Watching everything from afar, the villain's leader shows no emotion on his face. Suddenly, the brave student jumps out furiously from the middle of that massive magic explosion. But a thunderous purple lightning bolt strikes the center of that small village with great force. The mystical explosion lifts the debris, destroying the houses of the poor town even more. The intense glow pushes away the heavy clouds, creating a chaotic scene in that sky. At that moment, a blonde-haired warrior feels the strange and powerful energy there. The beautiful leader tells her strong ally to keep walking to try and help. The fallen boy in the battle receives a mysterious warning to open his eyes quickly. He wakes up lying in a place full of blazing flames and shadowy arms across the floor. The young man gets up slowly, surrounded by fire, not knowing where his body was hidden. The same voice announces that fighter was just a sad, small, and useless creature. Irritated by the provocation, the warrior looks around, demanding answers from that being. A giant shadow smiles in the flames and begins to mention the enormous pain of that poor boy. The entity focuses on the hatred the young man has for his great weaknesses from the past. With a scared face, the apprentice focuses his eyes trying to understand the monster's tricks. The gigantic shadowy spirit rises behind his back, ready to test the rookie. Trembling in the dark, the boy questions it, completely terrified by that mystical place. The being claims to be the personification of pure fury, admitting to being drawn by all that hatred. Quite confused, the fighter questions the grand creature about its true motives. The cruel shadow lets out a laugh, finding the human's effort against his destiny hilarious. It guarantees that all that useless struggle for survival was completely pitiful. The panting boy stares at the spirit, trying to comprehend those heavy insults. But the Great Fury warns that everything has a sad end, telling the young man to accept his failure. Filled with outrage, the hero clenches his fist, grinding his teeth with a lot of strength and willpower. The boy refuses to accept the end, declaring that he still needed to live a lot longer. Mocking human weakness, the spirit questions the chances of such a wounded fighter. Ignoring the warning, the boy gets ready with an intense fire glowing in his fists. Then the dangerous monster decides to propose a strange deal for help in that scenario. The swordsman student turns his face, paying close attention to that grand offer. The entity reveals that it possesses the ability to grant immense shadowy and divine strength. But the price to possess the great advantage would be giving up his true identity. Blind with anger, the apprentice accepts the dangerous help to secure his long-dreamed revenge. The shadowy spirit agrees and extends its massive arms to seal the wicked deal. With a tight squeeze, the monster swallows the boy, merging their powers within that mind. The entity officially seals the pact, cursing the boy's poor soul forever. The young man plummets into a reddish abyss while a huge shadowy hand tries to catch him. Surrounded by flames, the young man reaches out his hand, hearing the scary voice tell him to move forward. With this, the warrior falls deeper and deeper into the darkness while the monster tells him to break free. Taken over by the immense evil power, the boy lets out a fierce shout, his eyes glowing intensely. Suddenly, a huge pillar of purple light strikes the enemy leader with great force on the battlefield. The young healer suffers in agony, screaming in pain as her entire body is consumed by the magic. The pale invader simply watches the giant mystical tornado without showing any concern. With this, a gigantic column of energy shoots up to the sky, lighting up the entire destroyed village. The force of the impact is so great that the debris from the houses begins to fly everywhere. The sinister flash sweeps across the battlefield, creating enormous destruction wherever the light goes. Standing before the storm of power, the cruel monarch stays steady with an imposing stance. At that moment, the gray-haired warrior turns his face, feeling a very dangerous aura approaching. Just then, the corrupted youth leaps from the sky, delivering a brutal strike against that terrible enemy. The Master of Darkness widens his eyes a little, becoming surprised by that unexpected assault. Full of fury, the boy displays a frightening look, completely dominated by the strength of the shadows. The clash between the two powerful forces generates a large explosion, clearing the dust from the area. Soon, the hero lands on the ground, wielding his weapon with great firmness and determination to win. With his face taken over by hate, the apprentice gets ready to continue attacking that evil being. The sovereign remains motionless, protecting the energy tornado where the young mage is trapped. The poor sorceress suffers a lot, screaming while the cruel magic consumes her sweet essence. Seeing his beloved suffer like that, the warrior grinds his teeth with an uncontrollable anger, taken by the power of the dark. The young man lets out a fierce roar, releasing all his massive energy. The pale man just observes the scene, intrigued that that boy is still standing in the battle. Suddenly, several frightening creatures approach across the muddy ground surrounding the fighter. The army of monsters advances with their sharp blades, trying to protect their evil leader. Seeing the huge disadvantage, the young man prepares to fight against all those countless enemies. With a lot of coldness, the gray-haired monarch orders his terrible creatures to finish the intruder. With this, the scary zombies launch into the attack, obeying the commands of their shadowy master. But the corrupted apprentice spins his weapon in a fast move, defeating several at once, showing an incredible speed. The boy runs, slicing through everything that appears in his wide path. Using all the strength of his body, he destroys the monsters with an impressive ease. The pale invader slightly widens his eyes, getting a bit surprised by that skill. The young hero stands amidst the fallen enemies, covered by an immense reddish aura. Next, the fighter focuses his deadly gaze straight at the leader of all those beasts. Without wasting any time, the brave warrior runs with a lot of fury to attack the big boss. Standing in the rain, the sovereign awaits the impact, noting that the young man turned into a real monster. The boy keeps running at an absurd speed, kicking up a lot of dirt wherever he goes. However, the Master of Darkness lowers his face, showing that he was not intimidated at all. At that, the skilled apprentice steps on the muddy ground, gathering plenty of momentum for a big leap. With a gigantic jump, the hero flies through the dark skies, being illuminated by a massive thunderclap. The experienced warrior also draws his weapon, preparing to defend himself from that strike. Facing the boy, the cruel invader calmly announces that all that power was not enough. The youth's strong attack clashes against the villain's defense, generating a shockwave across the ground. Taken by the evil power, the student uses even more strength, trying to break the master's defense. But the gray-haired opponent holds off the heavy assault, using his arm without showing any effort. The blades tremble from the strong friction, throwing bright sparks everywhere in the courtyard. Observing the anger on the boy's face, the pale man simply maintains his unshakable stance. Suddenly, the pressure becomes so great that a piece of the boy's sword falls into the water puddle, ignoring the damage to his weapon. The valiant fighter pushes away the defense and prepares a new brutal attack. Blinded by the fury of the shadows, the boy acts like a real beast and bites the monster's neck. A large amount of blood splashes everywhere after this desperate move. The young man is thrown back while the villain questions if he will not stop until his very end. Falling to his knees, The boy displays red eyes, totally overtaken by the evil energy, full of anger. The hero grips what is left of his sword with great strength and determination. Wrapped in darkness, the valiant apprentice charges forward, looking like a truly relentless demon. The pale invader accepts the challenge, telling the rookie to fight until his very last breath. With this, the boy lets out a fierce shout, showing his teeth stained with that blood. In a huge leap, the fighter launches a gigantic reddish slash against the strong enemy. Standing in the same place, the monarch just lets the strong wind blow his hair. Without stopping for a second, the youth attacks fiercely, trying to find an opening in the defense. But the invader's cruel gaze shines from behind the blades, showing his superiority. The clashing of the weapons creates bright sparks, while the apprentice forces the attack to the maximum. With extreme ease, the powerful being of darkness defends against that sequence of strikes. The swords keep clashing violently in the middle of that heavy, destructive rain. Stepping back a little, the corrupted boy acts more and more like a real animal. He charges again at an absurd speed, going head-to-head against the Grand Master, crying from pain and anger. The poor hero screams, releasing all of his worst feelings. Suddenly, the shadowy sovereign strikes back with a brutal blow, launching the warrior through the air. The heavy impact makes the swordsman fall, destroying the mud-filled ground around him. Floating in the sky, the cruel monster prepares a gigantic shadowy energy explosion. Lying on the dirt, the hurt fighter screams, begging the villain to stop that attack. Without showing any mercy, the cold invader just looks at the boy with a lot of contempt. At this, an immense destructive ray crosses the sky, falling directly toward the apprentice. The violent magic hits the ground, creating a brutal detonation capable of erasing anything. The impact kicks up a colossal cloud of dust and rocks all over that poor village. Walking through the fog, the pale villain waits calmly for the smoke to settle. When the dust settles, we see the young sorceress glowing intensely, lighting up the village, crying heavily. The brave girl touches the jewel on her forehead, seemingly making a strong decision. With this, she raises her head, revealing bright purple eyes full of pure magic. Suddenly, we are taken to a mysterious place where a goddess reads on a floating throne. The strange divine place is completely lined with gigantic piles of old books. In the middle of all that knowledge, a special book shines, flying high up in the room. The mysterious book opens up, revealing words about how fury leads everyone to a terrible ruin. The beautiful lady continues reading that, even when consumed by flames, anger never has an end. The scene continues, showing the vast immensity of wisdom hidden in that beautiful kingdom. With a serene look, the grand divine entity observes all the cruel secrets of the universe. The pages describe that warriors of hate are born only to destroy everything in their path. The woman points her finger, reading about the cursed spirit completely dominated by rage. She then states that those fighters end up destroying even their own bodies. Back to the sad battle, the cruel invader prepares a powerful punch, loaded with shadows. The villain lands a very violent blow, throwing the young warrior straight to the dirty ground. Without any mercy, the monarch continues beating up the poor boy under the freezing storm. Trying to fight back, the valiant apprentice charges but ends up being easily blocked by the enemy. The powerful shadowy being attacks again, showing all the superiority of his lethal strength. Claiming that the weak always lose, he brutally grabs the young fighter's head. Watching her great love be crushed, the red-haired girl freezes in pure and absolute despair. The sweet mage stands up, walking slowly through the storm with her purple eyes. The young woman wonders if the terrible curse had chosen that boy for some hidden reason. Walking like a ghost, the heroine approaches the fallen body of her dear boyfriend. With a tearful face, the girl gives a very bizarre smile, finding the situation quite amusing. The dark-haired boy remains lying on the wet ground, looking completely motionless. Seeing the defeated boy, the cruel villain approaches, accompanied by the corrupted young sorceress. The gray-haired monarch thinks about finishing off the warrior but gives up, noting that the boy was already at his end. Flashing an evil smile, the girl warns that even if he woke up, the young man would just be a blind beast. With this, the two shadowy beings turn their backs and walk away, leaving the poor apprentice in the storm. With a completely wounded body, the fighter remains thrown in the mud, unable to move a muscle. At that moment, the white-haired invader stops his walk, looking back very suspiciously. A frightening red silhouette rises in the middle of the rain, holding its broken blade. The corrupted mage also looks back, giving a slight smile upon feeling that shadowy energy, taken by blind fury. The warrior transforms into a red beast, charging forward with great strength. Without showing any fear, the sorceress calmly raises her hand, preparing a spell. She praises the boy's great willpower, firing a powerful purple energy beam as a gift. The mystical flash tears through the destroyed scene with absurd speed and a devastating force. Soon, the violent magic hits its target, creating a massive cloud of dust and lots of destruction. The impact of the strike completely destroys the rest of the wooden houses, sweeping away everything in its path. A gigantic dome of energy consumes that entire area, shining brightly under the storm. Thrown through the air, the bruised apprentice falls violently amid the heavy stone rubble. The two villains stare at the defeated warrior from above, analyzing the massive damage from the attack. The rain keeps washing the sad battlefield, separating the cruel attackers from their victim. With a blank expression, the sweet girl observes the scene, fixing her beautiful red hair. She flashes an evil smile, commenting on the immense immense purity of the warrior fallen in the darkness. Seeing the huge purple crater, the woman notes that that dangerous power was still incomplete. The gray-haired monarch ignores the red beast, ordering that the two of them return to the grand castle. Keeping his feared, shadowy gaze, the leader listens to his new servant agree to the given order. With this, the villain tells the sorceress to bring a hidden item while she raises her glowing arms. A giant magic circle forms on the wet ground, emitting a very threatening purple light. Suddenly, a pillar of pure energy shoots upward, lighting up the entire rainy night. The strong magic cuts through the dark clouds, creating a frightening spectacle in that stormy sky. Seeing it from above, we notice the flash dominating the destroyed village beneath the intense lunar glow. Soon, a gigantic and violent lightning bolt cuts through the skies, crashing down heavily on the poor ruined town.